So here's our session 2. We're going to talk for the next hour about this task number 2, building pathways back. All right, so the first hour, we were just talking about kind of the basics, right? So in a perfect world, if we all got all the attachment we needed, then we are equipped with this big joy capacity to handle the big emotions in life, okay? Marcus Warner likes to say that we're all like Swiss cheese from a distance. By all, he's talking about adults here. From a distance, we look like a full block, but you get up close and we all have holes, okay? We have all missed out on something, okay? Nobody got everything. We don't get out of childhood unscathed. And so just recognizing that there's no shame in it when we go, I don't think I have that skill. We can just go learn it. Kind of like if my parents didn't teach me to play the piano, I can just go learn those skills today, rather than, focus on what I didn't get. Now, that doesn't mean we don't grieve it, because there's grief in that, but obviously not from the piano. So building pathways back. So we have a nice, firm joy foundation, strong attachments, and then we can experience life and all the emotions of life and have a pathway neurologically in our brain back to feeling safe, calm, and connected. So that's what we're looking for here, these pathways back. And this is what we can help do with other people through this concept called co-regulation, which we're going to talk about, but also with our children, okay? So we're going to do a little bit of brain science here. The point I'd like to for sure make here is that this is not about avoiding our emotions. In fact, this is about learning what to do with them. Because if we cannot stay present in our emotions, we cannot heal from them. We cannot navigate, right? And so I think a lot of us have a learned history. It's something in our brain that goes off when we experience an emotion that says, danger. We don't know what to do with that emotion. And so we might have some mechanisms that either kind of create a denial or a resistance to going there or a sweep it under the rug. I'm fine. I'm not going to feel that, right? So we're not talking about any of that. We're actually talking about how do we actually stay present, not only in our own emotions so that we can navigate it in a healthy way, but how do we stay present in somebody else's big emotions? And we all have pain in this area, so I want to acknowledge that too, because we all have a time when we risked being seen and we went and we tried to share with somebody a big emotion, and they couldn't handle my big emotion, because they don't even know how to handle their own big emotions, and now I'm asking them to sit in it with me. And so a lot of our wounding in childhood, a lot of our church hurt, a lot of our relationship pain comes from this place of, and it's not malicious, it's they didn't have the skills. We can't offer what we don't have. And so to just have grace with each other, in the learning of these things, because it's just messy, and there's no perfect way, but the hope is that, and obviously you're not going to remember everything today, but the hope is you'll go away with one or two things that resonate with you, and you're like, okay, this is something I want to learn more about. I want to learn how to be better at sitting with people in their pain, because there's a lot of it, and we all need people. So, all right. So we talked, and I believe there is a slide in here about the brain. So these things, connection, calming, attunement, action, and narrative shifting is actually how the brain develops from the bottom to the top and from the right to the left. And so when we're talking about it, we're going to talk about it in order, because it's how it foundationally lays in the brain. So this felt sense of I'm not alone, right? I told you babies come out looking for who are my people? Who's happy to be with me? Their only job is to receive. My nephew, I used to watch him, and he would come to my house and he would say, "It's me, I'm here." Because he knew that I would get all excited and I would, do a jig and be like, I am so happy you're at my house, right? And he learned that because he knew I was going to be happy to see him, right? His job, now obviously by that point he had verbal language, but when he was an infant, he couldn't do anything to earn my happy to be with you. In fact, he did a lot of things that would be disgusting. He peed and he pooped and I had to change his diapers and he cried and all the things, but I was still happy to be with him, right? And so he learned this, that she was going to be really happy to see me. So that is the sense of I'm not alone in the world, right? Because I know there's people that love me and are happy to be with me, even when life's not going well or I'm having a big emotion. So we want our kids, and I will say I wish I would have done this better. I told you I was learning this when my kids were little, but I did do the whole, you need to go to your room until you calm down. Oh, I could cry just even thinking about that. What I should have done is say, I'm going to sit with you until you calm down, right? So that calming, that co-regulation, what happens is that the nervous system of the child will regulate off of the regulated nervous system of the adult. So when a child is experiencing a big emotion, we sit with them in it. And the power of that on their nervous system, the power of that on their brain is fantastic. So I'm sure I did it sometimes. When I look back all those years ago, I'm sure I did this sometimes, but I do remember saying, go to your room until you calm down, because I was experiencing the big emotion, because they were experiencing the big emotion, and I was not a regulated nervous system for them to regulate from, and I knew it. And I knew that they needed to go into their room so that I could calm down. I'm not saying that's bad. Sometimes we have to do that. But the more I learned these skills, the more regulated I became in any big emotion. And the better I could sit with another person, when in a counseling session, right? If someone is so angry with God, they blame God. If I can sit with them in there and not judge and just sit and listen, that's powerful. So I can't be triggered and dysregulated at that, right? Well, I guess we can't always control it. But the more we learn these skills, the better able we are to sit with another person and their big emotions. Because the reason why we get wounded when we're trying to share some of our story with somebody and we're trying to invite somebody into our big emotions is because they get so uncomfortable that they begin to employ the same skills that they do on themselves on you. It's okay, here, how Kleenex, right? Or, you know what, just, bootstrap that thing, rub some dirt on it, and you keep going, right? Those are the things that we were taught as a kid, because, and so those are the things we tend to want to offer to other people when they're experiencing big emotions, because that's what we know to do with them. So if we can learn a different way of sitting in our own big emotions, we can learn a different way of sitting with other people in their big emotions, and it does make a difference. So that attunement is there somebody who will sit with me in this? And we're going to talk about that. The action step, once a person is regulated, so here's our brain, all right? Up here is the prefrontal cortex. Okay, this is the action center. This is the part that has to be online for me to feel like myself and act like myself. This is also where my relational circuits are. Not my attachment, but my relational circuits. So this is when I'm happy to be with you versus you are a problem I have to solve. I tell the story all the time of when my kids were little and they were all in bed. And so John and I were on the back porch and talking and just connecting and having a peaceful moment. And I was like, I'm going to go check on the kids again because they're so cute when they're asleep. So I'm walking up the stairs and I see these little handprints going up the stairs and I'm like, oh, look at how cute they are. I'm even like a little tear. One day we're going to miss these, these little hands that I get to hold every day. And, that wasn't the first time that day I'd seen those handprints though. Earlier that day, right around 4 o'clock, And if you have young kids, you know what 4 o'clock is like. I saw those handprints. And I got so frustrated because they represented a problem I had to solve. I had just repainted that hallway. So now I had to get those handprints off and maybe even have to repaint them. And I'm like, oh, I asked her to wash her hands after she ate, right? So I'm seeing the problems earlier that day, because earlier that day, I did not have my full access to my full brain. I had flipped my lid a little bit, and we're going to talk about that. So when we're not connected, we don't have that full brain. In your little library, you have a book called The Whole Brain Child, and it's all about this concept. This is a Daniel Siegel concept of, down here we have our attachment centers, and we have our amygdala. This is our emotional brain that says, am I safe or not safe? This says, am I loved or not loved? Okay? If I feel loved and I feel safe, I have access to my full brain. And up here is my problem solving. Up here is my identity. Up here is my relational circuits. Creativity. We want our full brain. We want our law enforcement with their full brain. We want our military with their full brain. We want them problem solving and creative, and when they're out in these life or death situations. And we want our kids with their full brains. But what happens is when we're not feeling loved or we're not feeling safe, we can do what's called flipping the lid. It's like a little switch that gets switched neurologically. And now I'm in a survival mode. This part of the brain takes over everything and says, how do I get out of this safe? Okay? So back to my story. After connecting with my husband and having a peaceful moment, I had access to my full brain, and suddenly I was actually sentimental and tearful over those little handprints because my relational circuits were on and I was able to see how sweet they are and that I was going to miss this. Earlier that day, I can't say I was fully flipped, but I was not fully connected either, and all I saw was a problem that needed to be solved. So if the people in your life that you usually love to be with are driving you crazy and you're just picking out all their flaws and all the reasons why they're annoying you, probably your relational circuits are not on. There's a little book in your little library called The Joy Switch by Chris Corsi, and it talks a lot about how to keep those relational circuits on. So that's the action center, is we want this online. And then the narrative is, what stories am I telling? So we are always telling stories. We are meaning makers. We take in data and we make meaning from it. But that meaning isn't always true. And it isn't always, good. So we're either living a grand story of redemption with a happy ending, or we're living in a bad story that's going to have nothing but doom, right? And sometimes we can't figure out which story we're living. So my brain might say we're living in a grand story of redemption, but my body is acting as if there's bad things everywhere and, survival mode, right? So this is kind of the why behind this, and this is the power of what we believe in the stories that we tell. All right, so we're going to unpack all that. Here's the brain model. It develops from the bottom to the top and from the right to the left. So we need that secure foundation. We need a nervous system that's regulated and grounded in that firm foundation so that we know what safe feels like. And guys, I can guarantee most people, not most, I don't know what but a lot of people do not know what safe feels like. We have lived in so much turmoil and so much crisis that your nervous system may not know safe. It may not know calm, and it may not know connected, and that's okay, because that can be healed. You can learn how to feel that safe, calm, and connected. It is never too late. I have a 75-year-old client learning this, and it is revolutionary to him. And it's so beautiful. I've watched Jesus step in and lay a firm, secure attachment with a daddy, a 75-year-old man, for the first time feeling secure attachment with a dad. It's beautiful. Jesus can do that. So those things are subconscious, below the line. We don't have conscious. We can recognize the signs that our nervous system may be in fight, flight, or freeze, which is this. But we don't necessarily know the why because it's all happening subconsciously, okay? So this is part of the awareness process of learning what are my safety cues. First of all, what is my nervous system, which we're going to talk about, and recognize that my nervous system is different from yours because of my learned history. So the things that are safety cues for me might be danger cues for you. I mean, a cat. My husband's really allergic to cats. So danger cue. If a cat walks in, he immediately starts getting out his inhaler and walking the other direction. I like cats, so I might pet one, right? And then I'll wash my hands really good before I go home. So what's a safety cue for my nervous system is different for everybody. So you need to know what yours are. What are your safety cues? What are your danger cues? Connection is a safety cue for me, but for many people, it's a danger cue. And so recognizing that about yourself. And if that's the case, how do I train my brain and my nervous system that connection is good and it can be good? And there's a whole process of doing that. All right. So these are our big 6 emotions here. Jem Wilder is a neuroscientist. He calls himself a neurotheologian. He and Kurt Thompson, also neurotheologian, so they really tie scripture in with the neuroscience. It's a fascinating field. I highly recommend if anyone's interested in learning a little bit more. There's a couple books, The Other Side of the Church, which is about the brain. I know it sounds like it's about the church. It is, but it's also about the brain. Jem Wilder and Marcus Warner wrote a book together called Rare Leadership, and it gives you really quick, easy understanding the brain science. So I recommend that. But Jem Wilder identified these 6 big emotions as being, so we need a path. And if you've ever watched the movie Inside Out, it has this neuroscience in it. It's actually really accurate. So we have these islands. All these big emotions are like an island, and we need a bridge that bridges from that emotion back to feeling joy, safe, calm, and connected. Okay, so how do we learn this? So this is ideally learned in the foundational stage of life, right? So when the baby cries, the attuned adult comforts, changes the diaper, provides them the food, meets the need, okay? So it's all external regulation, meaning there's an outside source helping that baby regulate. Okay, that baby doesn't know how to regulate himself or herself. So then after that, there's a season of co-regulation where we're doing it together. So the child may say, I'm hungry, or I'm thirsty, or I'm hot, or I'm cold, and the mom helps bring the regulation, or the dad or the caregiver. That's working together. We never outgrow our need for co-regulation. We might not need it as often, but we still will always need it, okay? Because we are designed relationally to be in connection. It's just how we're designed. Then we have self-regulation. So if that happens hundreds of times, baby cries, adult picks the baby up, comforts the baby, helps the baby calm, then there's a neural pathway in that baby's brain that goes from that big emotion to safe, calm, and connect, and the baby learns there's always going to be somebody here that is going to help me, right? So we want that brain to learn that, and eventually that baby can do that itself, okay? It's self-regulation. So, the child's at school, something happens, feels sad, that child has that pathway back. Okay? Now, that doesn't mean they don't need to come home and tell you all about it. That's co-regulation. We need to do that too. But that's the idea here, is that they have a pathway that they can use when they're experiencing a big emotion. So we need one for each of these. So you might look at this list and you might go, who needs a pathway back from disgust, right? Well, that just probably means you have a nice, strong pathway there. If you're like, oh yeah, shame, I don't come back from that. I tend to spiral and stay in shame for days, right? You might not have a very well-paved path from shame back to safe, calm, and connected. Shame is a big one for all of us, by the way, because it attacks us in the area of identity, and it's so core to us, and it also attacks that that attachment, right? Because what shame is an assault on who we are. So it's a big one for everybody. Shame resilience is the term we use to learning how to come back from that. And it's kind of its own, I like to tease it out because it tends to be a trigger for a lot of people, the human experience, right? But, sometimes people will say, oh yeah, for me it's anger. Once I'm angry, I just can't come back very easily. So just knowing that about yourself and saying, I'm going to intentionally work on building this pathway. And how you do that is you find someone who's really good at it and you hang out with them. Because remember, this stuff is caught, not taught. So, I have a friend who is really good at talking to anybody about anything. And I'm like, I'm glad you're my friend. Number one, because then I don't have to figure out how to talk to anybody about anything because she does it for me. But also I'm learning from her how to do that. And I'm finding I'm getting better about it because she's so good at it and I spend a lot of time with her. So find somebody who's really good at that thing that you're like, I'm just really not very good at that, and learn. But the same is here, for learning how to come back from some of these emotions. All right, so what happens when we experience an emotion and it feels so overwhelming that I'm starting to get triggered, okay? So this is my overwhelmed guy. Maybe y'all can relate. So what is overwhelm? So actually the definition of trauma is overwhelm, okay? To the extent that I no longer feel like I have the internal, external resources to navigate what I am experiencing, okay? In other words, I can't do this. This is too much, right? That's how we feel when we are overwhelmed to the degree that we might go into that fight or flight, okay? That's a really simple definition of trauma. It's basically, I don't feel like I have what I need to handle this, and so I go into a state of trauma. I'm not talking here about what we think of when we think of trauma, okay? So just for the purposes of our conversation. If we get stuck there, and honestly, there's a lot of people who are stuck in a state of fight or flight. They don't know how to do this coming out of a sense of that survival mode, right? Because the brain, maybe through experience, has learned it's not safe to relax. So that can impact sleep. If your nervous system is stuck, revved up, and you're not able to engage that parasympathetic nervous system, which we're going to talk about, sleep is really hard. So is digestion, because that state is called rest and digest. So anyway, let's talk about that. But I just want to point out that if you live in a state of sympathetic dominance, which is the gas pedal, which we haven't gotten to that slide yet, but it leads to burnout. So it's something really to understand about ourselves. If maybe we have a trauma history and our body may be stuck in that fight or flight, there's a cascade of physical, emotional, and spiritual symptoms that we can experience. And I only point this out because once you learn the skills and you learn how to live in parasympathetic dominance, which is the break, that rest and digest, a lot of those symptoms can resolve and heal. And so that gives folks hope, I think, sometimes. All right. So this is just another way to say what I just said. This green zone is called the optimal functioning zone. That's when I look like myself and I act like myself and I'm feeling relational, okay? Within that window, we'll get there. But within that window, there's a slide in a little bit I'm gonna show y'all, but I'm gonna go and explain it now so this makes more sense. So, like I said, we run like an engine, okay? So when I talk to kids, we do a lot of this like an engine kind of talk. We have a gas pedal and we have a brake. The gas is that sympathetic nerve, it's the get up and go. So we need get up and go, right? We have to get to work. We have to get our laundry done. We have to do all the things, okay? But then we need to be able to apply the brake and rest and digest, okay? So we need both to be in our function, to be ideally functioning. We need both good get up and go and good break, rest and digest. When we get overwhelmed or stressed, I call it living on the rim. Being on the rim is not a bad thing unless you get stuck there, okay? Like I said, we actually do a lot of our best learning and growing when we're on the rim, okay? This is called post-traumatic growth. So when I can experience a hard thing, adversity, a hard emotion, and I can come back from it, I actually just strengthen that pathway and I actually am stronger, okay? It's like going to the gym. Now, the difference is if we fall outside of that into that overwhelm, okay, we can still come back from it. But I'm just pointing out we don't want to live in overwhelm, but it's not necessarily a bad thing. We call it like toxic stress versus healthy stress is kind of the life model way of talking about it. I have a hard time using the term healthy stress, so I talk about it different, but it is true. So, window of tolerance. Okay, so this comes in handy when you're working with kids in a classroom or in a small group, understanding when they're in their window of tolerance, okay? Meaning their brains are connected and working optimally. When I'm with a client, I want them in their window of tolerance because we need to be fully present to feel our emotions. Okay? If I notice that they're dysregulating, they're falling outside of their optimal functioning zone, that tends to be when we employ our coping skills that aren't as helpful, like denial and dissociation and, bootstrapping. When we just say, I'm not going to think about it, I'm going to distract, I'm going to think about something else, right? So we actually have to be able to feel our feelings. That's actually number one in our emotional regulation, is to be able to feel our feelings. So, we want to live life in our optimal functioning zone. And Daniel Siegel and a lot of the neuroscience experts call it the window of tolerance, okay? If we fall outside of our window of tolerance, we can go too high, and we can go into those high energy emotions like anxiety and stress and fight or flight. If we go too low, we go into those low energy emotions like depression and sadness and despair. I can't get off the couch, right? So we really want to stay kind of within our window of tolerance, but even just recognizing what my window of tolerance is and also the people that I love, okay, is helpful. The other day we were talking about relational circuits, my husband and I, and we were at a wrestling tournament for my son, and he lost his earphones. And we were looking everywhere for these earphones, and I tried to make some comment that was not very helpful in the moment. He looked at me, he said, "My relational circuits are off." I just need to find my headphones. I was like, got it. So that's what he was telling me. It was like, I'm not in my optimal functioning zone. I need you to stay with me and help me find these things, and then we can have this conversation later. But it's a really good skill to have with the people that you are doing life with, right? All right. Trauma is the impact of not feeling equipped to handle what's in front of me, right? And it sounds like, I feel alone in this. I can't do this. This is too much. That's what you hear people say. It ruptures our capacity wall. When there's a lot of trauma, there's a boundary breach, right? So those boundaries keep the good things in and the bad things out, right? So when we have that trauma, there can be a boundary breach. We're not really good at holding our boundaries when we're in trauma. There's trauma A, which is the absence of the good things. Maybe I didn't get those eyeballs that I needed. Maybe the people were not very happy to be with me because they were distracted or overwhelmed with life, right? Maybe I got some things missing, holes in my Swiss cheese, right? Those are those absence of the good things. Trauma B is the presence of the bad things. That's typically what we think of when we think of trauma, okay? The abuse, war, natural disasters, that kind of thing. And then I call trauma C complex trauma. Other people have different terms for it. But complex trauma is ongoing in a variety of different kinds, right? It's not just one event and one kind of trauma. It's just a lot of different trauma over an extended period of time. It's complex trauma. Trauma is just unprocessed negative emotions. We can have unprocessed trauma. We can have unprocessed grief. Okay, so there's always grief that goes with trauma. There's not always trauma that goes with grief, if that makes sense. But anytime you have trauma, something was lost, taken, harm was done, that there is an element of grief. I always say there's 3 kind of, I hate to use the word stages because it's not linear, but tasks that happen in a healing process. The first is awareness, just even becoming aware of what are my triggers, what has happened, what is my story. 2 is the grief. We got to grieve what we didn't have. And then the 3rd one is the healing work. So they remain unprocessed because we didn't have the time or skill to process them, okay? So that term, when kids are so resilient, right? All that tells me is their brains had this ability to compartmentalize and move on. Because if they didn't process it then, they're going to have to go back and process it later. So this is where having an attuned adult. And research shows you only need 1, okay? So even that could be a teacher. But 1 attuned adult that sees you, believes in you, and tells you that, right? And it takes that time to speak into your life. Is enough to start laying this foundation. But if we don't have people in our lives that have that skill of sitting with you in your big emotions, I always just say you just kind of put that in the to do that later box, because they're going to have to at some point unpack that if they're going to heal from it. So unprocessed grief and unprocessed trauma are usually what create these triggers. And people say this to me all the time, why go back to that? I'm past that, right? That's in the past. And I always say, great. If it's in the past, don't worry about it. But if it's impacting you today, it's not in the past. So sometimes you just have to go back long enough to feel the feelings that didn't get felt and unhook that pain. And then you really, truly can move forward and, thrive. So, all right. Emotional regulation, the ability to return to feeling safe, calm, and connected after being triggered. That's all it is. I can regulate my emotions. I can regulate my nervous system. I have those skills. There's internal skills and there's external skills, right? So people, places, things that help me regulate. That's that co-regulation piece. Faith. That special place that you like to go, sit by the water, listen to the water, whatever. I love anything with water. Oceans, lakes, pools, fountains. I don't know why, I just do. So I put a little fountain in my backyard and I just go plug that thing in and I sit in the sunshine. And that's usually all I need to get myself feeling like myself again. But I know that about myself. And then the internal skills, right? That's that noticing, that awareness, what's happening in my body. I was a counselor dealing with complex trauma for probably 10 years before I realized what was happening in my nervous system every time I heard a trauma story. And I started to feel these symptoms of burnout and didn't understand why, because in my head, this isn't hard, but I was not aware of what was going on in my nervous system. So when I started learning how to drive my nervous system, meaning I'm with a client, if I start to feel myself tense up, and I know where those tense places are, right? We all kind of have them in our neck or our hip or whatever. When I start to feel that tense, I go, my body must have, seen a danger cue of some variety and started tensing up. So I take my deep breaths, I relax my muscles. You can look on the periphery of your eyes, because when we go into fight, we zero in and hyper-focus on the thing right in front of us. So if you can just, even still looking at the person, just start to do this peripheral sight, you'll send a cue to your nervous system. Everything's okay. We can relax, okay? It's the little tricks I learned. I can relax my nervous system. Because when your nervous system is not relaxed all day long, you can sit in a chair all day long and go home exhausted and not understand why. Sitting in a chair all day long has absolutely exhausted me. Well, that's why. But if you can relax your body and have those internal skills of awareness, relaxing. A huge part of mine is that connection to Jesus, because he has infinite emotional capacity. He never runs out, and he has no limits to his. So I can connect to him relationally, and that just sends those all kinds of beautiful things, right? I'm not exhausted at the end of the day. I actually have energy for my family, right? So that's why it's powerful. All right. So we do need to have these skills, though, and I didn't bring it in. I have 2 balls, these little bouncy balls. One is a deflated one. And if you've ever played kickball or basketball, and with a deflated ball, it's not fun, right? It just takes all the fun out of it. It's actually just so sad when it just flops down. So that's this idea of I don't have the refilling skills. So stress, we all have slow leaks, right? We need to have those ability to refresh, replenish ourselves at the end of a day. Joy is the air in the ball. So if I took another ball that was fully inflated and we played with that, it would be really fun because it has enough air in it to bounce back. So that's the metaphor of building bounce. And so what makes me smile? What can I do when I'm feeling big emotions that help me feel like myself again? There are a bunch of skills. And then we already said this, post-traumatic growth. Every time I travel from overwhelm back to that calm, even if I rupture, right? One of the biggest gifts you can give the children in your life is rupture and repair, because rupture is a part of life. But to have the skills to circle back and repair, that's where the magic is. So, gosh, man, I wish I'd handled that better. I'm sorry that I got frustrated. That was me not handling my big emotions very well. Will you forgive me? Next time, I'm going to do better, right? That's repair. We need to learn repair. We've kind of forgotten some of those skills. I'm just saying. Our culture, I can't even drive down the street anymore without people getting, frustrated. So anyway, repair is important. Okay, practical tools for regulation. All right, so there's 2 ways to calm. The bottom up and the top down, okay? We typically think of top-down skills, which can be great. That's employing our logic and our verbal, okay? Because that's all up here. But what happens if they have flipped their lid? Their verbal skills are not online right now. So if you've ever tried to reason with a 3-year-old having a temper tantrum, it doesn't go well. So we need to try a different approach. Rather than trying to be logical and verbal, instead, we can start from the bottom. So it might look like just sitting next to them. If you take deep breaths and you feel your feet on the floor and you say a prayer and your nervous system calms, they have these mirror neurons in their brain that are just going to automatically regulate off of your regulated nervous system. It is such a beautiful gift to offer the children in your life, your spouse, this regulated nervous system. I didn't have a lot of regulated nervous systems, so I didn't learn this till later on in life, and that's okay. I hear that all the time. People tell me that all the time. There was no regulated nervous system in my world, and that's okay. You can learn it. But you know the power of having one if you didn't have one, right? So be a regulated nervous system to your children. You'll hear them kind of go, that's usually a sign that brain is starting to come back on. Then you can start talking to them, because that alarm bell is so loud when it's ringing, they can't even hear the words you're saying. So it's kind of a waste of your breath. But once they're back online a little bit, they usually can start having conversations like, man. And then we can employ what we call the VCR method, okay? That's validate, comfort, and recover. So validating is helping them to name what they're feeling, okay? So that's, wow. I feel like, were you pretty angry? You seemed kind of angry. Yes, I was angry, right? You got it. You validated it. Yeah, You don't have to agree with why they were angry or how they handled their anger to understand what angry feels like and validate the feeling of angry. That would be really frustrating. Yeah, I hear you, right? We're not teaching or correcting. We're just sitting with them in it and helping them to name it, right? Because feeling the pain and naming the pain are the very first steps to emotional regulation. So if we teach them not to feel it, they can't name it, right? So they have to feel it and name it. All right. Once they come back online, then we can do the comfort. The comfort is like that, giving them our nervous system, giving them our emotional capacity, letting them borrow it. That's that comfort, the power of presence. That's what we offer the world, right? And then the recover is that C. So once they're back online, you can offer your wise counsel, right? We as parents, we kind of tend to like to fix things, if it's appropriate. That would be the time to bring that to the, what if we did this? What if we went and did some repair, or whatever the thing might be, the action step. But if we bypass the validation and the comfort, that action step is going to feel shaming. It's going to feel like I was missed. I wasn't heard, right? And we all want to be seen, known, and heard. Okay. So these are the ABCs to emotional regulation. Appreciation. What makes you smile? I had a dad after this he told me the story. I went home. My son had been with grandma all day, and grandma was like, yeah, he's just been off all day, just kind of crabby and, not really cooperative. And so he was just dysregulated for whatever reasons. And so the dad had just kind of heard all these things. So the dad says to the son, hey, buddy, what makes you smile? And the little boy was like, well, my dog. I like my dog. My dog makes me smile. And my friend down the street, he makes me smile. And so they talked about that for like 5 minutes. And he said it was amazing how all of a sudden he was acting like himself again. He was being cooperative again. It just helped his nervous system get back online. So the why is the safety cue. Appreciation feels like a safety cue to the nervous system. Breathing, I teach this to kids all the time. There's a lot of great breathing techniques out there, and I recommend breathing, so it's good. But I've had people say to me, I get so stressed out trying to practice breathing. I think we've made it a little complicated. So I say, well, I can offer you what I teach the kids, and I have had a lot of adults go, that makes so much sense to me. So one is, I call it the cupcake, so I actually have cupcakes in my office, and so we'll pretend they're hot out of the oven. So we learn 20 times faster in the context of fun, just FYI. If you make it fun, they'll learn a lot quicker. So they're really hot, they just came out of the oven, so we kind of pull them out of the oven, and so we can smell how good they smell. You guys can think of a cupcake just fresh out of the oven. Oh, it smells so good. But I want to eat it now, and it's hot, so we have to blow on it. Okay, simple. Also, bubble wands, the same breath that blows a good bubble on a bubble wand is a calming breath. So, but you do want to take in through the nose, so that's the caveat there. And birthday cakes, blowing up birthday cake candles. There's just fun ways to teach it. Soup is the other one. Same thing with the cupcake. You have to smell the soup and then blow on the soup because it's hot. But that's just how you have fun with kids doing blowing breath, because when we can breathe into our diaphragm, we have something called the vagus nerve, starts up here, it's a wandering nerve, goes all the way down, comes into our gut. When we take a deep belly breath, we are actually putting pressure on that vagus nerve, which is the brake. So we can actually trick our nervous system into braking anytime we want by taking a nice big belly breath. If you get hyperventilating, if you feel like you're hyperventilating when you're breathing, it's probably because you're breathing into your chest and not into your belly, in which that sends a signal of panic. So when people tell me I get so anxious when I breathe, I'm like, you might be just going shallow breaths, because that will tell your nervous system danger, right? So we want to take belly breaths. And then co-regulation. I will sit down next to my husband on the couch and say, hey, will you put your hand on my back? So there's this spot right here between the shoulder blades that vagus nerve, again, kind of wanders right through there. And just having that hand on your back and then just breathing, that instantly I feel that co-regulation. So if I have a kiddo, like I was driving my son this was a couple years ago, to practice. He drives himself everywhere now. It's kind of sad. But I had my hand, he was worried. He was panicking he was going to be late. So I just put my hand right there on his back. And it's like, it's okay, buddy. We'll get there on time. And I watched him, okay. So it's just little things, right? But those are some tricks. All right. This is the breathing exercise. We can all do it together. Okay, so inhale for 4 seconds. Hold it for 4 seconds. Breathe out for longer. You want to get all the air out. And then hold for 4 seconds. This is called breathing in a square. This is what they teach military. They have to be nice and calm, to do their things that they do. And then smell the soup and blow on the soup. All right, so then the other way to calm is from the top down. So when my brain is connected and I'm in my optimal functioning zone, these things are great. Practicing appreciation, those narrative shifting that I told you guys about, checking the narrative, is this true or not true, right? I'll run you through a few ideas for that. But, and then making a plan. We talked about the power of having a plan in the brain. So here's an example of what that might look like. So when someone's in the catastrophizing, right? Like all bad things. This is going to happen, and this is going to happen, and it's going to be terrible, right? Like catastrophizing. And we can spiral, right? And ruminating on that kind of thing. So what's the worst thing that could happen? So letting the brain go to the worst thing. What's the best thing that could happen? What's the most likely thing that's going to happen? And then let's create a plan based on the most likely. So when COVID hit and we realized this was longer than 2 weeks, my family made a plan because I had been studying a lot about resiliency and the power of having hope and optimism. So hope is that plan, right? And I also like to say this is why Jesus is our hope, because he's our plan, okay? But we made a plan. Everyone set a new goal. Everyone was like, oh, I want to learn to do this, or I want to do this, I want to do this. And we made a plan like a daily schedule, and we'll do our homework here, we'll do something fun here, we'll do something quiet here, and then we'll work on something we want to learn. So my daughter said, I'm going to learn to paint my room. My son was like, I want to learn how to play the guitar, right? Everyone had a thing they were going to do during this kind of, and it wasn't about the thing. It was about having a goal, something to look forward to. And I was like, let me know if you need help. Let me know if I can help resource you in any way to do whatever this thing is you've decided to do. But that's why having a plan can be helpful. List of truths. So I always say, if you can look back and you can see a time in your life where God stepped in and you felt his presence and he provided for you, write about it. Keep it available to you. Because when we rehearse these things, these are these stones of remembrance, right? When we rehearse these things, we're reminding ourselves of the faithfulness and the goodness of God. And when we're feeling stressed out, and the story we're telling is that, I'm not seen, I'm not known, I'm alone, and we can go back and rehearse that time when, that I felt safe, calm, and connected, or that time when God stepped in and provided for me. You're reminding yourself of, wait a minute, I'm not alone, right? So just having your list of truths, those moments in time where you were like, yep, I want to remember that. Keep a list of them. And then finally, this connected, and we've probably talked a lot about this. This is lending our emotional capacity, this power of presence, is just so important for life. We all need to know we're not alone. Undoing aloneness. This is all stuff we've talked about, so I'm going to just kind of move on. This is a Brené Brown quote. If you put shame in a petri dish, it needs 3 ingredients to grow exponentially: shame, or secrecy, silence, and judgment. But if you put the same amount of shame in a petri dish and you douse it with empathy, it cannot survive. So empathy is about connection. It's about you're not alone in this. I see you, I hear you, I'm still happy to be with you. That's connection, that's the power of it. And I think we can all probably have a story around shame. Shame, naturally, we want to run, hide, blame, just like Adam and Eve, right, in the garden. But when we risk being seen and telling our story, and we're met with happy to be with you in this, it is one of the most powerful shame it just dissolves the shame, right? So anyway, it's just powerful. I want us to be this for each other. Another picture of empathy. Meeting vulnerability with tenderness. How do we treat other people's vulnerability? And how do we want people to treat us in our vulnerability? All right, so we're going to end this session on this activity, and then you guys can, same thing, if you need to use the restroom or get a refreshing or coffee or something, feel free. We're probably only going to take 10 minutes here again, including the activity. So this is a building the bridge activity, and so it's like an island here. I want you to draw 2 circles on your piece of paper, and then I want you to draw a bridge in between those 2 circles. And I want you to think on the first circle, I want you to think of what it feels like for you when you're overwhelmed. So you just jot down a few words or a few things that maybe helps you capture that. What does overwhelm feel like? And then on the other circle, I want you to think about what does it feel like to feel safe and connected and at peace in the body. And just jot down a couple words there. And then for the bridge between the two, I want you to come up with maybe 2 things that help you get back to joy when you're overwhelmed. And I'll give you a couple of mine. I love to go for a walk and talk. Something about walking and talking. So I grab a friend, or my husband and I will go, and I'll just talk about how I'm feeling and walking, and it's just super helpful for me to calm and reconnect. Hot bath is also, for whatever reasons, just fantastic for me. And like I said, sitting by a body of water. I'll just even go turn the fountain on. I like sun on my skin, so just 5 minutes out in the sun with the fountain running is enough to reset my nervous system. So those are my ideas. And I'll let you come up with 2 of yours, and then as we talk, you might think of some more. And then when we come back, we'll do a little bit of Q&A.